This is the Kitchen Sink WP Podcast, episode 649.
I program my own computer.
We have a server crash, 404 error, page not found, links aren't working, system is crashing, system is crashing, system is crashing.
Your old HTML website, barely alive. We have the technology. We have WordPress. A new website, better than it was before. Better, stronger, faster. We have the technology. The technology.
Why? Hello, everybody. This is Adam Silvey, host of the Kitchen Sink WP Podcast. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. All right, upcoming events. We have two next weekend. One is WordPress in Education Showcase. It is Friday, the 7th of August. It's in Luweero, Uganda. Let's take a look. What is that one about again? I wanted to share with you. This is a first WordCamp level event by the Luweero WordPress Meetup Group, part of the third annual ICT exhibition. So it looks to be pretty cool. If you're in that part of the world, you should go. And the other one is WordPress Campus Connect. It's one of those events. This one's an entire month. It starts on August 8th, goes through the 22nd. I'm guessing just on the weekends. It's in Udaipur, Rajasthan. And that is, once again, like I said, it's a free community-driven initiative bringing real-world WordPress education directly to college campuses across Udaipur. So it's from August 8th through the 22nd. You get a certificate, real build websites, free workshops. So check that out. Links in the show notes for both of those. Moving on to segment one in the news, two things to talk about here as well. First and foremost, WordPress 7.1 Beta 4 is out for testing. It contains more than 114 updates and fixes since the Beta 3, including 51 in the editor and 63 in core. Of course, test it, report back. Do not use it on a live server, live site. Okay. And also in the news, apparently WP Engine has partnered with BigCommerce to scale WordPress stores. I guess they announced Commerce Connect. Commerce Connect partnership with BigCommerce that enables e-commerce stores to do some work there as well. So, BigCommerce is a competitor, I'm imagining, right, to WooCommerce. I've never used BigCommerce. I should go and look at that as well, actually. I did a whole series of e-commerce alternatives versus Woo. But Woo is still, I think, one of the biggest out there, obviously, in the WordPress space. But if you're interested in that, great. Link in the show notes about it as well. I found that over at searchenginejournal.com. Pretty interesting little story there by Roger Monti. All right. That is it in the news. Moving on to segment two, the meat potatoes of this week's episode. So it's been at least 5 years since I've given the Kitchen Sink WP podcast website a meaningful redesign. And honestly, it might have been actually even longer than that. It could very well be longer. I'm thinking, did I do it when I got here in North Carolina or before that? I don't remember. I remember starting just doing the homepage and I'm thinking, I have to do the whole site. I have a vague recollection of doing it at a co-working space, but I'm not sure which one. Anyway, so that being said, and while the site still works and episodes get published and people can find the show and listen, nothing's necessarily broken, but that the saying "it still works" isn't always the best standard for deciding whether a website is still doing its job well. So this week, I want to look once again at when should you redesign a WordPress website? What's the process look like now in 2026? And how are some of the new AI tools might change the way we approach this? Also, I'm going to use the website as a test subject, obviously this main site, with a slightly ambitious goal of getting a new design launched before episode 650. So next week, will that happen? There's a chance. I think the percentages, it's right now as a recording, 50-50. I'm going to go with that. So fingers crossed on that. Okay, I have 5 sections to go over about this, and then one of the sections has some steps in there how I will be approaching this. Starting with section 1. How do you know it's time for a redesign? Well, start by making the distinction between a site being old and a site feeling or functioning old, okay? A website does not automatically need to be redesigned every 2 or 3 years. If it's fast, accessible, easy to use, still visually appropriate, and still supporting the organization's goals, there may be no reason to replace it. However, there are warning signs that, for example, the design no longer represents the brand or content. The homepage does not make a site's purpose immediately clear. Maybe mobile navigation or readability feels awkward. What else? The theme or page builder you use has become difficult to maintain. You hesitate to send people to the website because it just feels dated. And of course, the organization or project has changed, but the website has not. So for Kitchen Sink WP, the question is not simply, does the website still publish podcast episodes? Because it does. Does it properly introduce the show, help someone discover useful episodes? Yes. But there's more to that as well in my case. So the listener takeaway here for you is this. Open your homepage. Give yourself 10 seconds. Can you tell what the site is about, who it's for, and what the visitor should do next? Better yet, ask someone unfamiliar with the site and have them do the same test. Get that feedback. It's important, okay? All right, moving on to section 2, start with the purpose and content, not colors. And what I mean by this is many redesign projects go sideways. We immediately start choosing fonts, colors, layouts, themes before determining what the site actually needs to accomplish. In my case, I would first define my essential visitor journeys. A new visitor wants to understand what the podcast is about. The listener wants to find the newest episode. Someone wants to search or browse old episodes by topic. I might have a potential sponsor or guest who wants information about the show. And a regular listener might want to subscribe or follow the podcast in a different way, in a different, how to find it on the different platforms. So that leads to potential content and functionality. Meaning a clearer homepage introduction, a prominent latest episode area, better search and episode filtering, which I really do need to do. I realize that as I say this out loud, I'm thinking, yeah, that's going to have to happen. And I've been working on it. Cleaner individual episode pages if I do that, or if you need that on your site, and links obviously to the major podcast platforms that are easy to use. Okay. And one more, a simple guest or sponsor information page, which I have, but it could be updated as well. So this is also the right time for the content audit. Decide what should be preserved, consolidated, updated, redirected, or retired. A fresh design placed on top of 10 years, or in my case, 12 and a half years of unexamined content is not a complete redesign. So before looking at themes, write down the 3 most important things visitors should be able to accomplish on your site. That's the takeaway here. All right, section 3. What does modern web design look like in 2026? So rather than treating trends as a visual gimmick, frame them as changes in visitor expectations, okay? Some worthwhile designs, the directions, these things, they include cleaner layouts with stronger visual hierarchy, larger, highly readable typography, more intentional use of white space. That's been a thing off and on for many years, probably over at least a decade. Fewer competing calls to action. You want to just have ones that make sense and just less of them. I see too many sites these days with that. Subtle motion or interaction that supports the experience. Yeah, not a whole lot of motion, but some subtle there. And more personalized content, contextual content when it provides real value. So for a heavy content site like a podcast, I think the most useful trend may be treating the archive like a searchable knowledge library instead of just a chronological wall of episodes. And saying again that out loud, it gets me thinking I have to address this as well for my own sake. Okay, so the takeaway here, choose trends based on whether they make the website clearer, faster, or easier to use. Quote, everyone else is doing it, end quote, is not a design requirement. All right, section 4, how I'm proposing I use AI in my assistant redesign workflow. Okay, this is probably how I'm going to do it. There's about 4 or 5 steps in this section itself. Step 1 is audit the current site. I need to document the existing theme and plugins, the current template, and any custom code I have, which isn't too much. Might check the traffic and most visited web pages, see if I have any outdated content. I know I do. Any broken links, check the current site speed and mobile experience, and make sure I document the podcast feed, the embeds, any forms, redirects, so all that survives any redesign. Okay. Step 2 in this section is how I will do design exploration. In this case, I'm using Lovable because I can give it information about the podcast, the audience, the desired pages, the colors, the tone, the functionality, what I'm looking to do with it. And I can have it produce one or more possible homepage concepts. And from there, I can get the subpages as well to be, kind of that consistent design that I want to go with. And of course, Lovable can sync the project that I give it to my GitHub, which gives me more control over what I create from there. And I've talked about that, I think, in the past. So I will take it from Lovable to GitHub, take the GitHub down to my computer, which takes me into step 3. And step 3 would be that I'm going to create a local WordPress copy. I'm pulling a current copy of the main website into local, formerly known as local by Flywheel. This lets me preserve the existing site without having to worry about messing anything up on the live server, obviously. I can test plugins, I can test theme changes, I can compare old and new designs, and responsiveness, functionality, etc. And I can also share a temporary preview through live links if I want to have somebody else look at it for Q&A, which I very well may do. from there, and in addition to that, so I'm bringing a copy in, but it takes me right into step 4, which is using Codex, because I'm going to use Codex to do most of this work. Well, I think so. I think that's the process here. And maybe with Novamira, which I spoke about last week's episode. As a reminder, Novamira is not simply just an AI design plugin. It's going to help me with the MCP connection between AI coding and the WordPress installation locally on my computer. Also, quick side note. After last week's episode was recorded, I realized some additional use cases for myself with KitchensinkWP and Novamira, because the test site that I had no real data content in it. I couldn't really dive deep because there was no depth to the site, brand new site. So I was thinking about that. What could I do with it with a deeper site? In this case, KitchensinkWP, 12 and a half years worth of content. I could use it to look at analytics, getting information out, like tip and tool of the week for every episode, which I did actually a year ago. I was looking to make a spreadsheet to know what were all the tips and tools of the week that I've done. And I did that through the database. But now with Novamira and tools like it, an MCP interface would be much faster than pulling from the database, I believe. So back to using the tool. It would open the door to requesting information or giving it tasks to build a homepage based on the approved design, create reusable episode card patterns, improve the podcast archive layout, remove unused and obsolete CSS, and maybe even identify plugins that I don't need anymore. Now, I want to be careful and give you a warning here, and I want you to be cautious because it's important. Giving the AI agent access, file system access, PHP and command line access is very powerful. And again, less concern if you're running local, but if you're connecting it to a live site, keep that in mind. Make sure you have backups, make sure you have version control where possible, and human review before anything reaches production. Okay, and step 5 here is test and launch. So before I publish, I need to test all the menus, all the forms, the new search, the new podcast player if I have one. I want to verify that the podcast RSS feed still works. That's not going to change in my case. I already know that because I have no plan on changing anything there. I want to make sure that I preserve titles, descriptions, and structured data. What else? I need to confirm the analytics are still working. Again, that won't change because it's more of I'm not changing that plugin and that backend just yet. Any redirects could change. I mean, some pages might redirect for forms and stuff like that, but also have a backup of the live site before I deploy and have a rollback plan. Having the backups key, knowing how to use it is a separate step. So keep that in mind. And just as a quick takeaway, yes, AI can dramatically accelerate the redesign, but it should not eliminate staging, testing, backups, or human judgment. Okay, so I think that's important to take into consideration here. Okay, and the last section, section 5, how do you future-proof a redesign? Well, you can't truly future-proof a website. You can, however, make the next change much less painful. For me, it could mean keep the podcast content separate from its visual presentation. Use WordPress native blocks and patterns where practical. Minimize the plugin count and document why each plugin exists. Maintain regular backups. I do that already. Keep a lightweight staging or local development workflow. Document any custom code that I use, and I do use some, and I've been adding some more things to that for forms, which I'll get to in the next week or two. I actually want to share one of the plugins I wrote. I think I mentioned it already about spam. Anyway, so the goal is not to build a site that's going to look untouched and perfect all the way through 2031 and beyond. The goal for me and for you is to build one that can evolve without requiring another complete teardown. The site in question, my site right now, it's old. I mean, I'm just trying to remember really when I did it last, and I don't recall. I mean, in the 12 and a half years that KitchensinkWP has been around, it's only had 2 site designs. That's not that many if you think about it. So, takeaway for you real quick, create a recurring yearly website review. Check content, design, accessibility, performance, security, plugins, the things we should be doing all the time, especially as business owners. Small improvements prevent the next redesign from becoming a major emergency. Okay, so that's the plan. Audit the existing site for myself, using Lovable to explore the design, rebuild it, test it locally, see how much Codex and an MCP tool like Novamira might help me. And from there, we'll see what comes of it. Now, like I said, I'm going to attempt to have this redesign before episode 650. And I say that I am cautiously optimistic and maybe just recklessly too optimistic here. It could be not good. Anyway, either way, I will report back on what worked, what didn't, and where the AI tools did save time and what I experienced during this whole process. So there you go. Let me know if you have any questions, if you want any advice or feedback on this, and we'll go from there. All right. Moving on to segment 3, tip and tool of the week. This one I just heard about on a podcast recently. I've just downloaded it, haven't tested it yet, but it's called buzz.xyz. It's a free open source decentralized collaboration plugin platform developed by Block. Block is owned by the guy who originally started Twitter, now known as X, Jack Dorsey. What I've heard about it is a alternative, a self-hosted alternative to Slack and or GitHub. So it's a competitor to that. And it's AI native, AI agents into one workspace. So I believe you can use that with tools like OpenClaw and Hermes and maybe even Novamira. I don't know, but you can talk to the agents instead of using like some of the other applications people are using. Discourse, I believe, is one of them, or whatever it is. So there's so much going on in that space. It's overwhelming, even to me, as I look at the notes here. So check it out, buzz.xyz. All right, that's it for this week. If you have any questions, go ahead and send it in via email, adam@kitchensinkwp.com, or use the SpeakPipe function on the website. If you want to support the show, you can become a Patreon, kitchensinkwp.com/Patreon. You can also buy me a coffee there. If you want to sponsor, fill out the form. I'll get right back to you. Thanks for listening. See you next week. Now go out and do some awesome things with WordPress. All right? Bye-bye. This is the Kitchen Sink WP podcast episode. No. This is the Kitchen Sink WP podcast.